Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, WomanVerse Travels. For those of you that have never been here before, hi, my name is Sydney. I'm an international school educator and someone that loves to travel and experience new things. My goal in life is to make sure that I fully live, and by doing that is by saying yes and seeing what the world has to offer. This week we are in Torres del Paine National Park in southern Patagonia, just at the tip of Chile. Not at the very end, but we're pretty darn close. This is a region formed by ice, wind, and tectonic uplift over millions of years. I'm so excited that you got to join me because we are 2 spots away from getting 100 subscribers. I never thought I would be able to say that, and honestly, I'm just so grateful for the community that I've had, for those of you that have stayed along the way, and for those of you that are new here. So, let's begin. Today we're going to see as much as we can of untouched wilderness as a result of cultures adapting to these insane conditions across thousands of human generations. This journey and this video is hopefully a travel and historical documentation for all of you watching at home and for me as a reminder of ways that we can explore and navigate conservation. My starting point was in Puerto Natales. In the first clip, you saw me eating by their lake. This is the shore of the Ultima Esperanza Sound. The first human presence in this region dates back more than 10,000 years ago, documented through archaeological findings in nearby caves and coastal sites. All throughout the town, they are known for being the entranceway or the portal to the end of the world. I thought that was incredible and something that I wasn't fully expecting. The coastal islands and forts that are here were traditionally home to the Kawésqar people. They were maritime hunter-gatherers who traveled by canoe, moving seasonally along channels and inlets to hunt sea lions, fish, and collect shellfish. Their shelters were temporary, but their movement was continuous, which is kind of what you need in these really, really hostile temperatures. A cultural system adapted to cold weather and shifting weather rather than fixed settlement. As you will learn throughout the video, this is a place that constantly has changed. Torres del Paine is separated into different sections. In the inland steppe, which is where a lot of the wildlife stays, was inhabited by the Aónikenk people, which are also sometimes known as the turquoise. They were terrestrial nomads who followed the migrations of the guanaco, the primary large grazing animal of the region. Their material culture was built around mobility, lightweight hide shelters, efficient tools, and social organization based on small, adaptable family groups. These 2 societies occupied distinct ecological zones but shared trade routes, stories, and occasional intermarriage. On the drive toward the park, I passed Cueva del Milodon. This cave contained remains of the Milodon darwini, which was a large ground sloth that lived until the end of the Pleistocene period. Its skin and bone fragments were preserved by the cold, dry environment, and the site has been central to understanding the region's prehistoric ecosystems. This cave illustrates a continuum: massive megafauna followed by indigenous adaptation, followed by modern pressures. As you can see, I've already arrived at my lodge. It is called Explorer Lodge. Now, the first written descriptions of the massif were recorded in the late 19th century by British, German, and Chilean survey expeditions. European ranchers arrived soon to this location afterward, establishing large-scale sheep operations. The term Paine comes from the Aónikenk language, meaning blue, describing the distinctive coloration of the mountains and especially the surrounding lakes. The lodge that I stayed in, as you can see here, Explora, sits within this historical threshold, where ranching territory shifted towards conservation. I'm going to share a full review of the lodge and its guided systems in a separate video, but I will give you just a short little sneak peek here.
Took quite a bit of a hit out of my savings, but so worth it. Oh my gosh, while taking the dump. But look at that. There's a little window so I can look at nature. Look at it. Okay, so I got a waterproof mini bag, which is funny. That's what I was looking for at one of the camping stores. I got a cute little note. It says, "Dear Sydney, nature invites to us to reset our peace following the rhythm of our heartbeat, the sun and the seasons. Reset with every breath, meal, and footsteps. Welcome to explore." Oh my gosh, that's so sweet. Never had that happen before.
A little bit more about the colonization and land displacement of this area. By the early 1900s, ranching estates controlled most of the grasslands here. This brought fencing, land subdivision, and competition for grazing territory. These changes destabilized the Aónikenk, whose seasonal mobility and access to guanaco herds were disrupted. Additionally, contact with settlers introduced diseases to which local populations had zero immunity to. By the mid-20th century, Aónikenk presence in this region had nearly disappeared. In 1959, the Chilean government designated the area as Torres del Paine National Park, shifting land use away from ranching and towards conservation. In 1978, UNESCO recognized it as a biosphere reserve, emphasizing the global ecological significance of the landscape. As you can see here, I'm in love with my room, but going back to my point of how drastic the weather changes, this view is completely inaccessible when it comes time to rain. During the rain of my stay there, you could only see parts of the lake. How much more for the whole mastiff to disappear? It was crazy. On my first hike that you see here, the water stood out immediately. The intense blue of the lake is caused by glacial flour, finely ground rock particles suspended in meltwater. These particles scatter light in the blue-green spectrum, producing the color that we associate with Patagonia, aka beautiful. This region sits at the convergence of the southern Patagonian ice field, ancient granitic intrusions, and sedimentary layers uplifted and eroded over time. Wind, as I've mentioned, is a huge thing here. It shapes the vegetation here, meaning that we have low shrubs, grasses, and small flowering plants that survive by minimizing surface exposure. And if you look at some of the plants in our video, you will notice that some of the trees are only quote unquote leaning to one side, but in reality have grown that way to make for the high levels of wind that come upon here. It's stunning. As we moved across the steep, I encountered guanacos, which you will see a little bit later. The primary herbivore of this ecosystem is the guanaco. These guanacos live in structured social groups led by a dominant male, with females and juveniles forming family bands. They communicate with high-pitched alarm calls and use elevated ground to survey for predators. Our guide liked to call them our watchers. And as you will see, they do take on high parts of the ground or stay a little bit apart from the rest of the group. However, where there are guanacos, there are pumas. Torres del Paine contains one of the highest puma densities in the entire world, and this has been documented through very long-term monitoring. Now, there are some companies that you can pay to track pumas professionally. They have the cameras, they have the equipment, but they're also going to run you a couple $1,000s. My recommendation, just bring some good quality binoculars and be on your way. It is part of the experience. There are some people that worked at the lodge that has shown me videos of pumas coming up to the lodge itself, but I say just be in the moment and enjoy what you can. Pumas rely on stealth rather than sustained speed, so they are hard to track. They are hard to spot. They approach from downwind, often along ridge lines, waiting for herd movement to create vulnerability. So if you do see a brown moving rock, chances are high you just spotted your puma. A successful hunt influences not just the predator and the prey, but nutrient distribution in the entire ecosystem, providing food for condors, foxes, and smaller scavengers. This is an example of a trophic cascade, where predator-prey dynamics directly influence vegetation patterns and the landscape structure itself. Now, condors. This was what I really, really wanted to see, besides the puma, of course. Condors are quote-unquote called Andean condors. And these animals use thermal air currents to remain aloft with minimal wing movement. What I noticed during my time there, as there were several condors no matter what my expedition was, and definitely around the lodge, is that they would wait until the winds were incredibly high, usually during a rain patch or some kind of storm, to take off into the wind. It was really majestic to see because I would not want to do that, but for them, that is exactly their natural habitat. Now, these birds have wingspans of up to 3 meters wide. That's crazy. Their ecological function is to consume carrion, accelerating nutrient cycling and limiting disease spread among animal populations. They are such a vital animal, not only here in Chile, but also in Peru, where I currently live. As you will see throughout the video, especially with the trees in the area, is that this landscape might look a little bit different from those of you that have traveled here before. This landscape has experienced significant wildfires, including major human-caused fires in 2005 and probably the biggest one in 2011, if I have my facts correct. This fire in 2011 burned thousands of hectares of native linga and near forest. These trees grow incredibly slow, and full recovery occurs on a timescale within decades to centuries. Restoration efforts focus on limiting erosion, protecting new growth from grazing, and supporting natural regeneration. Throughout our hikes and throughout the explorations, we did see several patches of land that have been closed off and marked as a way to show regrowth or reforestation efforts in that area. However, most of them have been absolutely unsuccessful. Visitor practices directly impact this process. It is important and vital to stay only on marked trails, follow fire restrictions, and minimize off-trail erosion. The park controls this by giving out hefty fines as well as ensuring that the tour guides that are necessary to explore within the park are also able to kick out visitors that do not follow these regulations. Under no circumstances, at least at the time that I visited, are fires able to be made or distributed on land. As you can see here, we passed a couple of the guanacos. They're so cute. And I do have to say, I had some guanaco tartar upon arrival back at the lodge, which is where I stay, and can see this beautiful waterfall just outside our window. As you can see here, these are some examples of guachos, people that work in estancias that live off the land and work with horses. The guachos working at the stables carry knowledge of seasonal weather patterns, horse behavior, and terrain navigation that developed during the ranching area and continues in conservation tourism today. Their role bridges historical land use and present-day ecological stewardship. I also found them to be incredibly interesting and will have a video on my time with a rancher that I spent with pretty much half the day to learn about their lifestyle, how they care for horses, and how they care for the land itself. As you can see here, we are finally looking at the towers themselves. It took us a while to get there because we had to go by land. I decided not to go to the base tower hike because my body was not ready for it, but the overland expedition that was offered by Explorer Lodge allowed me to be able to have this experience with a high level of accommodation. And it just worked in my favor. The final part of my journey included me going to Glacier Gray. Online, some things are calling it Gray Glacier, but either way, this is part of the southern Patagonian ice field. Glaciers in this area shape valleys through erosion, transporting sediment and influencing local climate conditions. To be able to get to that part, I did have to take a 1-hour hike through Gray Beach. I had to book a very spotty boats called Grade 2 Navigation. And I had to ensure that it was confirmed the day of. Once again, the climate conditions are always changing, and it was just so important to make sure that everybody is safe, the captain, the guest, and that we can make it back on time. Great Glacier has been retreating in recent decades due to changes in temperature and precipitation patterns. Its retreat is monitored to understand the broader dynamics of ice field stability in the region. It was also interesting to learn how much life did not live there due to the extreme weather and the fact that there were organisms that could not survive because of this habitat. Torres del Paine remains protected through collaborative management among national park authorities, scientific organizations, and local communities themselves. Continued conservation depends on responsible visitation and recognition of the cultural history that predates modern borders and infrastructure. This landscape reflects both deep time and ongoing change. To experience it is to understand that preservation is an active practice and not an assumption. We are all responsible for our Earth. We are all responsible for the life and biodiversity that is in it. And I can't emphasize enough how blessed I am, how grateful I am to be able to have this experience, but also to feel the weight of responsibility that I have in ensuring that these practices can continue by the time that I leave. As I mentioned, it's important for me to consider how to help moving forward. The future of Torres del Paine depends on continued protection and informed visitation. There are several ways travelers and supporters can contribute to the park's long-term health. The first is low-impact travel. As I mentioned, staying on marked trails helps in preventing soil erosion and protecting slow-growing plants. Following fire restrictions is critical, as well as ensuring that we are supporting conservation-based tourism. Local lodges and guiding programs that work under park management guidelines contribute directly to research, trail maintenance, and habitat restoration efforts. Choosing services and companies that prioritize environmental compliance helps reinforce these systems. The third is support for ongoing scientific monitoring. Researchers, scientists, tracking puma behavior, guanaco populations, glaciers melting, and forest regeneration rely on long-term funding. You heard me correctly. Organizations such as CONAF and regional research institutes provide open data that contributes to national climate and wildlife planning. I will put those information in my description. Learning about cultural history of this region matters too. Recognizing the indigenous people as the original inhabitants provides context for how land use has changed so far and why protection is necessary today. Understanding that history helps prevent oversimplified narratives about untouched wilderness does make a direct impact. Thank you so much for watching. I will be publishing a separate video on the guachos who work in the park today, and I have dedicated a lodge review available for those planning a visit. Until next time.